Hi, Dagna. How are you?
Hi, Nick. I'm doing really well. Super pumped to be here on your podcast. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for saying yes. As a formal introduction, my name is Nicolette. I am the creator for the podcast titled You're Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. I'm now based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, so greetings from Asia to you. And thank you for saying yes for the interview today. I'd like to read a bit of introduction to our
Mhm.
listeners today, and then we can get right into our conversation.
Let's go.
So, hey everyone, we have Dagna Bieda here with us. Dagna is an engineer turned coach for engineers and ambitious professionals in tech. With 10 years of coding experience and coaching since 2019, she's the tough love, been in your shoes kind of coach. Her clients' backgrounds include a spectrum ranging from ICs to CTOs, from small startups to FAANG plus companies, from 2 to 20 plus years of experience, and from self-taught developers through career-changing bootcamp grads to college grads and PhDs. She helps her clients reach their potential and exciting career opportunities by refactoring their brains. Wow. Welcome, Dagna.
Thanks for having me.
It's a lot to unpack. Tell us, first off, what was it like growing up as a
Oh,
Dagna?
I loved it. I grew up in a small village in Poland, a rural area. I knew everyone who surrounded me. My parents knew them. Of course, growing up, I thought it was boring.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
didn't had like a movie theater or like a pool in our area, but we had forests. We had beautiful landscapes, the serenity, the animals. I remember growing up going with my mom to the forest for some mushroom picking, which is very common in Eastern Europe. And it was such a beautiful childhood.
Now, you've started talking about your childhood. So tell us your backstory and, well, your career and also the lessons that you've learned, like from immigrating to you having a burnout, depression, becoming a parent, and this neurofeedback training in psychedelics. And then from being employed to having your own business, that's a whole
Oh wow, we have like
universe.
like 3 episodes here at minimum with the question
Okay,
that you asked, Nicolette.
okay, maybe the career part.
Yeah, okay. So let's start there and see where it goes. So
Okay.
basically, when growing up in this little village in Poland, I had this big plans and big dreams. I really
Mm.
wanted to create the future, whatever that means.
Yes.
So I chose to go to high school that was focused on math and physics because that's kind of how you do it in Poland. You pick a particular class setting which emphasizes certain subjects that can prepare you for a particular type of college, for example, or a particular type of job. So I went into college, into engineering, and the one that I picked for myself, my major, was actually control engineering and robotics. And I thought, well, if I get to build robots, surely I get to build a future, right? And it sounded
Mhm.
cool too, to build robots. So that's exactly what I studied. And I did had some programming back then as part of my college classes. It was just unescapable because in Poland, the curriculum is set by the government. And so you just kind of have to follow through. It's not really as flexible as some of the other parts of the world have it. Like, for example, here in the States, people pretty much select whatever they want to study, right? They just follow their technical advisors. Well, in
Right.
Poland, it's already set. So I had programming classes and I hated programming. Oh my gosh, it was horrible. It was one of the
Me
worst
too.
things. It's like, it's really has a steep learning curve. And so it was daunting. It was scary. I felt like a total idiot and it didn't feel good. So I started working as a robotics engineer, but then I quickly moved into software engineering because I realized, okay, I've built a robot. I was working with a company who was working under these European funded projects, European Union funded projects with several renowned universities in Europe, in I think it was Germany, Netherlands, France. We had our company based in Poland and we were building robots within that project. But I realized, okay, we're going to build a product, we're going to build a project, we're going to build a robot, and most likely, maybe like 5 to 10 PhD students will ever touch it in a lab in some university. Like, that's not the impact that I'm looking for. That's not the future I'm trying to build. And so
Hmm.
I migrated to writing software. And the first software job that I had as a programmer, as a software engineer, was at Nokia. Nokia, remember the phones?
Yeah. 3310, that one, right? Yeah.
Exactly. When I started working with them, they were focused in the office that I worked for at deploying the boxes for towers, for cell phone connection towers, so that every time you make a phone call, your phone will connect to one of the towers, the cell phone towers, that would then propagate the signal and make it possible for you to make that phone call, right? Because the cell phone towers would talk to each other within the network and connect people. And I worked doing that. And that felt incredible because I was one of like 200 plus software engineers working on the same product. It was both hardware and software. And I felt like we were deploying things to production affecting millions of people worldwide because everybody was using cell phones at that point in time. But around that time, I also met my husband. We were traveling, backpacking in Europe. I fell in love and I did something that people in love do, follow my heart. And I moved to United States because that's where my husband was based. And I ended up continuing my career as a software engineer here and started working in other types of projects. I worked in a consulting agency that had a lot of different clients. Consulting is a pretty good job when you're trying to understand the market and you're trying to get experience from different kinds of clients that have different kinds of problems. But at the same time, you start seeing patterns, problems, the same problems happening everywhere in terms of software engineering, legacy code, or, bugs, or the technology being outdated so very quickly. And the need to help it being caught up to the modern day standard, which keeps moving, right? The bar keeps escaping when it comes to technology because we come up with new cool stuff every single day. And what happened was, after that job, I moved into a startup that was pretty successful and grew quickly. When I started, it was 50 people startup, and I was the only female engineer. When I left, it was like a 300 something people company, and we had like 12 of us ladies and 50 engineers in the entire engineering department. So it was really cool to see and experience that growth within the career. But the job that was really rewarding, that I felt like, okay, again, I'm having an impact, right? I'm deploying apps to millions of users across the United States that are using our mobile parking apps. They felt good for a while, but then eventually within that time frame, I also became a mom. I had a baby and postpartum depression hit me. And that kind of compounded with the fact that I immigrated and I never really stopped to think about what it meant that I left my life behind. And even though nobody died, it felt like I closed a very important chapter behind me that I was still holding on to, that I didn't want to let go, right? And it was totally worth it, but it doesn't make it easier. It was still a hard thing to do, to immigrate to a different country. And then the not dealing with what the move meant with the postpartum depression, with the burnout at work, kind of compounded to the point where I burned out at work and I was no longer feeling excited about creating new features or finding new bugs. I was not excited about going to work at all. Life was like, meh, So eventually I realized, okay, this is not working. I need to stop pretending that things are fine when they're not fine. And I realized I need to reach out for help. So I started working with a talk therapist, or with a therapist, and we did talk therapy, I should say. And it was incredible because finally had a third party perspective of a professional of what wasn't working in my life and why. We were able to kind of figure out the root causes of all the issues that I was experiencing. One of the reasons I burned myself out is because I had a very high work ethic, I would just work, not really take any breaks, be a perfectionist, really make sure that whatever I worked on was just top notch.
Of the highest standard,
Of the highest standard, exactly. And so that kind of contributed to me burning myself out, and my therapist helped me see that. And when she helped me see that, I made adjustments which changed my life. And I was feeling excited again, but this is the kind of impact I really want. I no longer want to be on the technology side. I want to work with people and have impact on actual people's lives. because it felt so incredible that someone talked to me, and they were able to help me so much through just talking. And I
Yeah.
figured, this is what I want to do. This is my next thing. Yes, I'll be doing that. And I became a coach. That's exactly
Wow.
the journey of like how it all happened. I hope I was able to condense it and let me
You
know if there's,
did. And
yeah.
you know why I'm smiling all the way? It's because I feel like our story kind of similar. Although I don't have a kid, but my journey was more of exiting from a marriage
I
and
see.
then compounded with the high demand work culture in a prestigious firm, and also because you're there, you feel like you're are you worthy of the position if you're not performing your best? And then I did not also address the grief, what happened with my relationship. And I sort of like just swept it under the rug, said to myself, relationship might not be my forte right now. Let me focus on work. And then it came like it was, I resonated with that so much. And right now I am also transitioning from 9 to 5 to hypnotherapy and coaching because similarly, I found I came across this hypnotherapy by Marissa Peer and then I immersed myself. I was trying to kill two birds with one stone where I said, okay, I want to learn this thing, but then I want to also do therapy on myself. And then and through the practice sessions, we had graduates where we had to practice to gain the hours. And then, yeah, right now I'm here. So I love connecting with people with the same background, making the same transition. Now, I want to ask you, Dagna, what do you mean when you say that human mind works like software and can be?
Yes. So first off, before I answer your question, Nicolette, I love what you shared, right? And it is really funny that we end up having a similar kind of path of like going through something that completely changed your path, right? And in terms of work ethic, we are probably very similar because I work with a lot of clients who come from immigrant families from Asia. And
Mm,
so I can see that, right? That we're similar in that aspect of having a very high work ethic to the point of burning ourselves out, right?
yes,
And then, to top it up with the sweeping things under the rug, isn't it just like what most people do anyway? Just pretend the problem's not
yes,
there and hope it's going to just magically disappear.
severe,
But in
yes,
order to deal with whatever the problems someone is facing, like you have to face them, you have to attack them head on. And
mm,
that's the only way that you actually get to process whatever is like being stuffed inside you in the depths of your consciousness in order to actually be able to let it go. If it hasn't been processed, it's definitely somewhere there lurking and waiting for the most crazy moment to just pop up. For me, it was one of the meetings that I had one-on-one with my engineering manager. We're just talking, and all of a sudden I start crying because I don't know, because I was stuffing all those feelings and they
right,
came out in the most unexpected moment. And I felt so unprofessional. I'm like, who's this person? Like, that's not me. Like, I don't cry at work. This is ridiculous.
yes. And then we put ourselves down when we feel certain emotion and we feel like, oh, and when we do that, it's like, why am I not performing at the level that I used to perform before? And then again, the cycle of beating ourselves down and feeling worthless. And hence, that's why I started my podcast because of that.
Well,
Because I
that
wanted to
little
hear.
voice that keeps telling you that,
Exactly,
which is,
exactly,
it's not really true, right?
exactly. It's not.
So, to answer your question, because I wrote an entire book on the topic. Let me see. I think I have it somewhere. Oh, it's right here. It's right here. Here's my book that's currently
Ooh,
launching, and I'm super excited that it's finally here because it took like 2 years to get it to this point. And
wow.
I talk about inside the book how the human brain is similar to computer software, and you can reprogram whatever it is that you want to reprogram, whatever it is that is not working. So the idea here is that with what we know about the brain and neuroplasticity, the fact that our brain keeps on learning and rewiring itself, we can actually commandeer that process, right?
Mm,
We can be conscious about what is it that we're trying to work on, if we choose to face the things that we've been sweeping under the rug up until this point in time, and essentially reprogram them. AI is a very kind of popular topic these days, and our brains are just like AI in the sense, or AI actually is modeled after human brains. And here's how it works. When you have a bot, a machine that you're trying to train, you have a data set, right? And you train it with that data set in order for the bot or machine to solve a particular set of problems. And it learns through those patterns, and humans' brains acts exactly the same. Our lived experience is the data set, and then we just kind of operate based on the patterns from the past, right? So we might
Yes, that's right.
like to think that we are making rational, conscious decision at every point in time, but the reality is that very little of our decision-making process is conscious. Most of the decisions are happening in the background, and they are happening based on whatever happened in the past, because that's how our algorithms sitting here have been trained through our life experiences, right? And so in order to kind of reprogram the brain, you have to jump in and do what a software engineer does. You have to look into memory after memory, belief after belief. You have to examine them, see, are they really true? Or is it just something that was written in there some time ago and is no longer valid? I mentioned earlier that as a software engineer, my job was to help technology catch up with the current standards. A lot of the time, I would jump into the code and notice that there were some lines that were using an outdated framework, an outdated library. They were connecting things that didn't exist anymore, for example, and we had to reconnect things inside so they would point to the new framework, to the new library. We had to update things constantly for the software to operate correctly. And with the brains, it's kind of the same. So if you think about it, if there's something in your life that is not working, if you think, okay, if my brain is an app and it's not producing the outcomes that I want, then most likely there's a bug or there's a missing feature. So I need to either go inside and debug the code, or I need to create a new feature and add it to my programming, right? This is
Yeah,
exactly what you would do. And these analogies just work beautifully with the brain.
I love it. It's because our conscious mind is actually the one commandeering this body about 95% of the time. If I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure of the statistics, the percentage, but yeah, that's why. That's also the very reason why I went into hypnosis, because that's where you change your belief in your subconscious. You don't change it through your conscious. Now, coaching is when it is, at that point where you change your belief and then you go forward. But then I love the fact that you turn from a tech professional and now to a career coach. So talk to us, like, what are some of the achievements or like success stories that you've helped some of your clients?
Yeah, I'm really pumped to talk about this one, because there were some where even I was like, wow, it was incredible for me to witness and experience someone's journey. Because I work with people on a 4-month basis. It's kind of like the coaching package that I currently have. And so when someone signs up, we dive deep into some of their beliefs. The first thing that we do, that we start off, is we want to get a good understanding of what it is that they care about and value. And we dive into their values kind of like across their life. Because yes, we focus on the career, but the reality is everything's interconnected.
Yeah.
And whenever I work with people, I want to make sure that as we focus on the career, we make sure that the things that are impacting them from other domains of life are also taken into account, even though, again, the focus is the career. And so in such a short time frame, in 4 months, I was able to help my clients reprogram their thinking, see themselves and the opportunities in front of them from a different perspective. And I've seen a person literally double their salary. I've seen another person who told me that their anxiety in social situation went down by 80% and they could finally make friends, which was incredible. I've heard someone who told me that they used to have major imposter syndrome. They don't have it anymore. I've had someone who got a skip level promotion. I've had people get out of toxic workplaces. I've had people land jobs that they thought were out of reach and they didn't feel worthy of them. But I helped them see that it was just natural next thing for them and they were just underappreciating themselves and they went for it and got it. So like in a span of 4 months, if you're really open to reprogramming what's inside here, incredible things can happen. And I've seen it firsthand. So it's really incredible for me to see. And you talked a little bit about coaching. The way I see coaching is kind of like software update, right? Whenever we're using our phones, a lot of the time you have to like click, yes, accept, I want that software update to happen. And what happens is you get all the bug fixes, maybe some new features that come into your phone, and it gets downloaded so your phone or whatever device you're using gets more efficient, right? And software upgrades are phenomenal, but sometimes what you need is a hardware update, right? In terms of
The
a
phone itself.
in terms of the phone, you would just go to the store and buy a new phone. In terms of a brain, in order to do a hardware update, what I like to recommend to my clients is using the neurofeedback training that you mentioned at the beginning. So neurofeedback training is essentially this kind of training when you go into something that could be called the biofeedback clinic. I know that's how my clinic is called. And essentially what they do first is they put this cap on your head and they scan your brain and they're able to analyze how your brain particularly is working and tell you this particular area of your brain is underperforming and this particular area of your brain is overperforming. Front and the back are out of sync. So you're wasting a lot of energy because of how your brain is wired. So it's hardware. And when I went into my sessions, I went around the time when I was expecting a new kid. I knew I had postpartum depression in the past, and I read somewhere that this could help me prevent it. So I'm like, okay, so I don't have to have a postpartum depression after having a kid? Sign me up. Yes, because it wasn't fun.
Take
It
my
was not
money.
fun at all. Exactly. I mean, having a kid on its own is a challenge, but then, having the postpartum depression is compounding whatever challenges that you're facing. And when I did the training, for me, it took about 40 sessions. It was
Wow.
phenomenal change. I mean, it is a lot of commitment in terms of showing up to the sessions at the clinic, and it is quite a monetary investment. But if you think about it, your brain is involved in everything that you do. And I mean everything. So if you can improve what's between your ears and how this piece of hardware is working, everything else improves too. And that's hard to explain
That's so
sometimes
true.
because it feels very surreal. For me, sometimes I used to get triggered by certain sounds. I don't get triggered anymore. I used to lose patience with my kids pretty quickly or much quicker than I would like to. And I'm so much more patient right now because of the training, right? My brain takes information from the outside differently now because I've upgraded my hardware. So I highly recommend to anyone listening to look up if there's a biofeedback clinic around you or neurofeedback clinic. The training that I went through is called neurofeedback training, but also sometimes called EEG biofeedback. And it's super easy because from the point of a client, all you do is you go into your session, they put some electrodes on your head to read the signals, and you watch TV. And as the signals are reading what is happening in your brain, they adjust the screen. So like if your brain is doing what the clinician wants it to do, if it's being using correct frequencies to make sure everything is in sync and performing well, you will have this nice screen that you can watch. And it's fun, pleasurable, and nice. You're just watching a movie, right? But
I
when your
get
brain
it.
is not doing what it's supposed to, the
Then
screen
you're gonna
changes
be
its size.
straining.
Or the screen changes its size, the brightness go down, the volume changes, and for the brain, it's like a penalty. It's annoying. Your brain has to exert more energy to analyze that signal. So it's like, oh, okay, whoa. Let me just go back and use the frequency that the screen wasn't moving and it was nice to watch. So, from the perspective of a client, it's so easy, so much easier than talk therapy because there's no revisiting of the past. There's no talking to anyone and having to be vulnerable. There's no taking any sort of medication. There's no any homework. Like you don't have to do anything after the session other than have a good night's sleep for your brain to be able to to kind of fix itself per direction that it received in the session. So it's just phenomenal. Like, I can't stop thinking about it, to be honest.
Where did you do your sessions in the US?
Well, there's a clinic about 30 minutes from my house. So I went there. And I did it for postpartum depression. And when it turned out that one of my kids might have ADHD, I also took him there. They start as early as age 5. So the moment he turned 5, we went there, and all the problematic symptoms of ADHD went away after 20 sessions for him. So
Wow.
the way I think about it is, it was the best investment I could have made in my son's future, making sure
Wow.
his brain is optimal, is functioning in the right frequencies, and they're kind of all aligned. Granted, he's still growing, right? He's 5, and I think scientists are saying now that most of the brain develops until you're like 27 or 28. So he still has a way to go, but like 80% of it is already there. So what we did with that training was to kind of like
Recalibrate
fix all the things that are not there in the foundation and recalibrate to make sure he has a very strong foundation for the rest of his life, right?
Yeah.
Neurofeedback is often used for things like depression, anxiety, ADHD, problems with sleeping, addictions, PTSD, and whatever like other issues that are stemming from brain not functioning optimally, right? So there's a whole range of issues that it helps with, and I highly, highly recommend it.
Wow, I can tell you are like pitching for you should become an ambassador for this neuro. I mean, I've heard of that before, but I would reckon it would require quite a bit of investment. But for somebody who wants to invest, because like you said, this is involving every, I would say, next decision that you're gonna make in your life. So it's gonna make or break you. So yeah, I don't know if you have it in Malaysia, but I will definitely give it a search on
Nicolette,
Google.
after we're done with recording this podcast, I'll be like, Kuala Lumpur Neurofeedback Clinic or
No, right?
Biofeedback
Yeah,
Clinic.
exactly.
I'll be
Exactly.
sending a link. I'll make sure that you're taken care of. And I'm pretty sure
Aw.
that, the clinics are all over the world.
Yeah.
Recently, as I'm in the process of launching my book, I'm asking a lot of people in my network on LinkedIn to, like, if they would like to be better reviewers, right? As a better reviewer, they would get to read my book before it formally releases so they could give me feedback. And I had the same kind of conversation I'm having with you with one of my beta readers, and he's placed in Sydney, Australia, and he's like, I've never heard of this neurofeedback thing. And I'm like, okay, here are 2 clinics that you should probably call on Monday.
Okay, I think I would. I will.
I mean, and Nicolette, the thing is too, is like, imagine a life without anxiety, without depression, without worry, without rumination, when you have the most excellent sleep every single night, right?
I
That could
like
be
that.
yours. And then imagine getting
Yeah.
coaching on top of that, so you can become your peak performing self. You can be the best version of yourself you could ever possibly be, right? I mean, this is just so freaking powerful. It's like, I'm so glad you're having me on this podcast and we're having this conversation, because I feel like anyone listening can literally turn their life around no matter what they currently are, using these 2 things: the hardware update of their brain and the software update of their brain. And by software, again, I mean either coaching or therapy, really kind of like facing programming that they have here, the legacy programming in their mind that's most likely haven't been updated in years and probably needs an update, just like our phones get an update all the freaking time, right?
Yes. And I just had a thought like that is probably the best combination, because you're combining therapy and coaching plus the technology side of it, where your brain gets analyzed, and then it gets like you said, recalibrated to the right, how it should be syncing and how it should be operating at its optimum capacity of each side, whatever, left, front,
Yes.
back, right.
Exactly. And I was surprised to see, because like, I consider myself a high achieving performer. We talked a little bit about that perfectionism thing earlier.
Yes.
So, I see myself as this high functioning person. I wouldn't think that there's a lot to fix in my brain. And so when I was told that the front of my brain works slower than a typical person, so typically the scientists in their studies discovered that human brain operates at somewhere between 10 to 12 hertz, and my front was at 7, and my back was at 13. So like if you can imagine people sitting in the kayak, right? And the front just kind of going slow, leisurely forward. And the back was like, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. That kayak would be just like, like it's just
What the heck do you want me
what
to do here?
what a waste of energy, right?
Yes.
So like one of the parts of my training was focusing on speeding up the front and slowing at the back, because the back
Mm.
was, on the other hand, like processing too much information at 13 hertz, like processing noise, giving energy into processing information that was not necessary, which took a lot of energy away from me. And I have been noticing it right before neurofeedback. When I had these days when I had to focus a lot and work, I would have these headaches at the end of the day. And I felt like my brain was like dead at the end of the night.
Yeah.
Like I could just binge a Netflix show and that's it. I couldn't really focus and make anything meaningful and create anything meaningful. But I mean, duh, I spend all this energy on my back just like going.
Okay. Oh, we're gonna go and Google it.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
So, Dagna, what is next for you?
Well, hopefully this book becomes a massive success. I'm really hoping for the impact here. One of the things that I'm doing right now is, as it's launching, so before October 1st, the book is literally at the cost that will cover the print and hosting on Amazon. I am making nearly no money on it at all because I wanted to get into the most people's hands that I can, because I feel like what's inside here, and I talk about how you can get past imposter syndrome, how you can get out from burnout, how you can figure out how to communicate with other people better or figure people out a little bit better, which is very important for engineers. We don't have those skills most of the time. And I also talk about self-marketing struggles that many people face in tech industry, but other industries as well. So this book, a great potential to impact someone's life. So what I'm after is that impact. I want as many people to read it as I possibly can. And there's like 44 million software engineers in the world. My dream is for every one of them to read my book at some point in time. So that's really what I'll be focusing on next. That's my biggest adventure.
I love it. Can we go back to the part where you said self-marketing skills? So, how do you help your clients with their self-marketing skills?
Great question. So that is part of the bugs in their programming. A lot of engineers that I work with, and I used to be one of them, so I totally understand where this is coming from, have trouble marketing themselves because, one, we have this line of code in our brain that tells us your work speaks for itself. No, it doesn't. I mean, barely anyone who works with engineers actually knows what those engineers are doing, right? And people on the business side, especially, as long as the code works and it doesn't break or cause business issues, they're not going to care. They're not going to bother. It's just, for engineers, it's very critical to be able to verbalize and talk about what their contributions were in the language that other people can understand. So one problem of engineers in general is that as we're going through our career ladder, we're not really getting a lot of education around people skills, around communication, around marketing ourselves. So we don't have those skills. And when you don't have those skills, you just don't know necessarily what to do, unless you've been lucky enough to have someone in your career that have guided you in the past. But that's not the case for everyone, right? So a lot of people struggle with knowing how to approach this topic. And the other, bug in the programming, other than I believe that my work speaks for itself, which it doesn't, the other one is that you have to be humble, right? And bragging is wrong, and marketing is lying to people or tricking people into believing something that's not true. So, a lot of people in the industry would say, fake it till you make it. And that's a horrible advice for someone who's an engineer, because whenever you want to market yourself, it's important to do it from a place of integrity, from a place of what you believe to be true about yourself, about the value that you're able to bring to the table. And I help my clients see that, because sometimes they're not even aware of the value that they're bringing in. Like, a lot of clients of mine have gone through college, but a lot of them have gone through a bootcamp. Bootcamp is essentially like a 3 to 6 month training that gets you in tech without having a quote unquote
Great.
formal degree, right?
Mm.
And you might have a degree from like a different field, but in reality, what I'm trying to say here is that a lot of bootcamp grads don't realize that the skills that they have from their former career that help them collaborate better with other people that an average engineer are
Yes.
aces up their sleeve, but they don't see that.
That's
They only see like the technical part, and they want to get
because
better
I'm
in their
lacking in this
technical.
sense. Yeah.
They focus on what they're lacking instead of
Mm.
talking about their strength and talking about the power. And the reality is sometimes an organization, it's more important to have a strong leader who can bring a team of excellent engineers together so they do what needs to be done, rather than just keep adding those excellent engineers who cannot communicate with each other.
Yes. It's more like getting a holistic, prepping somebody to be a holistic individual, like performing their best at their job. I always believe that if you come from a different background and you're entering into something, you're really not starting from scratch because you're starting from experience.
Exactly,
And there's
from life
so many,
experience and wisdom.
yeah, exactly, transferable skills that you can use and apply and implement. I mean, provided, of course, you have to have that commitment to understand and learn the new industry you're jumping in, but still, you got to give yourself credit because maybe you have that courage to make that jump, and then therefore see yourself as valuable, if not more, than your peers that already been in the industry for so.
Yes, and let me tell you, Nicolette, something. I see a lot of bootcamp grads after they work with me have a phenomenal success because all of a sudden they're able to like jump through because they finally start appreciating what they have and capitalizing on their strengths
Yes.
instead of trying to make up for the weaknesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the clients that I mentioned earlier who had a skip level promotion, he came to me as a bootcamp grad and told me, Dagna, I've been doing engineering for the past 3 years. I've been, or can't remember exactly, and I've been told that our company is growing, trying to step into engineering manager role. I'm like, perfect. Let's get you up to speed. Let's check your skills. Let's see what are the gaps in your skill set or mindset that you might be having that would, stop you from being successful in that role. And he, instead of getting promoted to an engineering manager role, he became a VP of engineering and innovation in his company. So like a two-pronged promotion because
Wow.
he was a smaller company, just because he was able again to capitalize on what was already inside here, but he just didn't see it. I helped him see it.
Brilliant story. Amazing. So Dagna, we're gonna pivot to a self-worth question because my podcast talks a lot about self-worth. So the question for you, many people compare themselves to others in the age of social media, leading to feelings of inadequacy. So how can individuals cultivate a healthy self-image in the age of constant comparison?
My answer is going to be something you probably don't actually expect because
Don't compare.
well, right? I mean, that's the most obvious thing that you could tell someone to do. But if you've been comparing yourself your entire life and, you're conditioned, you're programmed to live your life that way, it's hard to kind of like just change it up. But I would highly recommend considering working with what's called plant medicines like magic mushrooms or ayahuasca. Of course, that's not for everyone. And it's important to take any medical precautions and talk to professionals about it before someone considers doing it. But I did it. I did ayahuasca. I did psychedelic trip last year. And it was the most profound experience of my life when I realized that the fact that I just am on this earth is incredible. And it's really a gift that I get to choose how I want to live it. That opened my eyes, right? And the reason I did psychedelics was because I started watching these Netflix documentaries, How to Change Your Mind. There's this series called Unwell, and one of the episodes specifically talks about ayahuasca. One of the people in the documentary was a scientist in a lab who was measuring how people's brains are reacting as they consume it in a lab. And they're just like literally measuring their brain activity as they're tripping. And the scientist was saying that a lot of
That's so
people,
true.
yeah. And he said that a lot of people say that with the changes in your brain, for some participants, it felt like 10 years of therapy in a weekend. And when as you recall, when I had my postpartum depression, talk therapy helped me so much, so tremendously. And I thought, I can get 10 years of that in a weekend? Yeah. Yes. Right?
You're up for anything that's gonna speed things up and
For anything
efficiency.
that's related to
Yeah,
growth, yes, yes, and efficiency and optimization. I believe I only get one shot at this life, so I want to
that's
make sure
true.
it's the best it can absolutely be. So I'm trying to like optimize whatever I can. And
I
the
love
great
that.
thing
Oh my
about it
gosh.
too is like when I started reading about psychedelics and educating myself and getting informed about the potential risks, because it's very important to talk about risks, right? You can have a psychotic outbreak. You can have, it's called serotonin syndrome if you're taking like antidepressants. So like if the medicine, the Western medicine and the plant medicine mixed together, they can actually kill you, which is incredibly dangerous. So
Mm.
you have to be really educated and informed if that's something that you're ever going to consider. But as I started getting educated, I realized that if I can scan my brain and learn whether my brain is at risk or not at risk, that would help me make a decision, which is actually what led me to neurofeedback. And
Oh,
in
so
that
it was.
neurofeedback scan, your clinician can most likely see the health of your DMN, default mode network. And by seeing if your DMN is healthy or not, they can assess if you're at risk of having a bad trip or a psychotic outbreak, or if you're not at risk. Of course, there are no guarantees, but I was told by my clinician, your DMN looks healthy. You're not at a major risk of having a bad trip or experiencing a psychotic outbreak. Plus, family history, medical history is important too. In my family, there's no one with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. So it was easier for me to make that decision, and evaluate the risks of doing psychedelics for myself. But another risk factor that I don't see people talking about is your age. I would not recommend anyone under 30 doing psychedelics because your brain has to be mature enough
Mm.
to handle the emotional stuff
Purge.
that is going to come up. Because
Mm.
it is going to come up. I guarantee you, it's going to come up. And your brain doesn't mature until like 27, 28. So by the age of 30 is when your brain is actually equipped to handle psychedelics and receive the most benefit out of it. I hope that makes sense. But when I did it, it's the psychedelics that helped me see that comparing myself to other people just doesn't make freaking sense because my soul received this body to be on this earth. And the only person I should and could compare myself to is my former self. So the question is, am I growing? Am I better than me last year? And I
Mhm.
am. So I'm
Yeah.
happy to report. But, if someone just told me, Dagna, stop comparing yourself to others, because of course I did that. Everybody does that. I wouldn't believe them. But because it came to me, from my own mind, I could finally believe into it. Plus, another reason I did psychedelics was I felt that in talk therapy, I reached the ceiling. Like, my therapist wasn't able to direct me anywhere because I feel like conceptually, I knew I had to let go of the past, forgive the people, move on, forge ahead. But it wasn't really integrated inside of me, in my heart, in my subconscious. Like, I knew I had to forgive, but there were those grudges. I was like,
No.
I'm gonna hold on to
Yes.
those a little longer. So like
Yeah.
conceptually, you might know something, but you're not really living from that place. With psychedelics, I was able to really integrate what I knew to how I was living and finally let go of that past, forgive, move on, and be excited about just freaking being alive. So again, highly recommend. Just make sure you inform yourself about the risks that this might be bringing. And personal note, this is just a story, not a medical advice.
Yeah, you made me think. Where did you do your psychedelic, your ayahuasca?
So
'Cause-
one thing that's really important is to go to a place that will make you feel safe, that has medical oversight and is legal. And there are places in the world where it is legal, perfectly legal to do psychedelics, magic mushrooms, for example. There's state of Oregon in United States. There's Netherlands in Europe. There's Jamaica in the Bahamas. There's some other places in the world too. With the ayahuasca, since it's used for spiritual reasons, I did it in Orlando, Florida. And again, completely legal setting. There was about 30 or 40 people tripping together with me. There were about 15 volunteers watching over us, making sure that everybody was good. And if they needed medical assistance, there was a doctor and I believe a nurse on the staff, and they had, their hand on the button to call 911 just in case anything happened. Fortunately, nothing happened, but I felt safe. And that's the most important thing. You have to go to a place where you feel safe. Like if something happens, because you're going to get the most vulnerable you've ever gotten in your entire life. But that's what makes a transformation really possible. It's incredible. And it's hard to describe it in words. I'm trying to create a Substack article describing my own journey, but it's hard to explain it to someone who hasn't experienced it, if that makes sense. But for me, being an ambitious professional, having kids was kind of tough because I thought like I had to put my career on hold, and I love my kids, but I feel there was a tiny bit of resentment there. Like, I'm doing this, but I really want to keep growing. I want to be making more money, and the things that we kind of chase in this modern world, right? And with psychedelics, I was able to see that there's so much time that I have in order to focus on my career, while my kids are going to be small only for such a small fraction, for such a small moment, a brief moment, a few years, and that's it. And they're not going to want to hang out with me anymore or hug me or climb into my bed anymore. So it's important to cherish those moments. I think that the biggest gift that I received from psychedelics was this refocus on stop being so much thinking about the past or about the future. Just be in the now. Just be alive. Just enjoy the moment. Embrace whatever's happening, and you'll figure the rest out. Everything will unfold as it's meant to. I feel like I came back to life after doing it, honestly, and I highly recommend it. Again, as long as you inform yourself, educate yourself, make sure you take risks into account, because it could be deadly, right? But in my case, when I did the risk assessment, it felt like the potential reward would outweigh all the risks, and they did. They sure did. I'm so glad I did it, to the point that I don't think I'll ever do it again. Right?
Yeah. You're just
Yeah.
radiating like, oh my God. Like, I need to do it at some point in my life.
Do the neurofeedback first. Make sure
Okay.
your brain is
Let's
like
go
ready.
to
Your DMN
Google.
is strong.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. After this interview, we'll do that.
Perfect.
So, Dagna, if you could create a quote right now for you to leave to the audience listening and the world as your legacy, what would it be?
Your brain works like code. You can reprogram anything.
Beautiful. How can people reach out to you?
I would love to connect on LinkedIn. My website, themindfuldev.com, is also a phenomenal place to find me. I have a special tab for my book right now if you're looking for links to purchase the book. It's available worldwide on Amazon, so I highly recommend that you get it. And in October 1st, it's also going to be available on Kindle. So if you like to read on your Kindle device or iPad or another tablet, you'll be able to get access to it. So stay tuned, and I'm super excited to hear from anyone who wants to reach out and connect.
Thank you. Well, for our listeners, you have it. There you have it, guys. You heard it from the person herself, Dagna Bieda. Before we close off, Dagna, I'd like to thank you personally for the work that you're doing for the world and for advancing every step of the way, despite the challenges, creating trails for those that will come after you. This has been that one podcast with that controversial name, You're Worthless. Read that again. The juxtaposition of your very soul. If you find yourself thinking that you're worthless, you're probably not alone. But more importantly, ask yourself a level deeper. If I'm worthless, then why the heck am I here? It is because your soul have chosen to be here energetically, all the way from the ethers, and for that reason itself, you are worthy and you are enough. This has been Dagna Bieda, your guest of the day, and Nick Niaras, your host, signing off. Thank you so much, Dagna, for your
Thank you. It's been a blast.